Hello, Prescott Valley. My name is Bob Tyser, Chief of Police for our fine town here. Welcome to another edition of Chief Chat. Today we're going to be talking about a very serious topic, and that is domestic violence. So we have three guests here today. Two of our guests are from the Prescott Valley Police Department, and our third guest, Missy from WIFAC, and she's going to be telling you what that acronym is here in just a minute. But before we get going with WIFAC, let's talk a little bit about what your duties are with the Prescott Valley Police Department, Sergeant Rudolph, related to domestic violence. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also talk about the laws as specific to Arizona?
Right, yeah, so Chief, we're part of the Special Victims Unit. We've actually been on this Chief's Chat before, speaking more specifically about sex crimes and whatnot, but also in our unit we do cover domestic violence. Our unit gets more of the felony domestic violence cases that come through, but obviously through the town of Prescott Valley we do have domestic violence like we have it anywhere, right? It's a problem throughout the world, throughout the United States. So actually, specifically with the town, we have about 5% of our calls for service are domestic violence related. However, about 15% of the criminal cases that are taken, the criminal reports, are domestic violence. So obviously, if we get dispatched to a case that's domestic violence related, if it ends up being criminal in nature, there's a higher probability that it's going to be something that we have to take care of. As far as the laws go, that with domestic violence, obviously there's a variety of laws, but I guess what we want to make sure that people understand is it's relationship based, right?
Relationship,
so,
yeah.
So any kind of family dynamic, whether it be brother, sister, mother, father, stepfather, those types of things. And also in addition to being a family relationship, it's, if you live under the same roof. So sometimes people don't realize if they get a roommate, once you become roommates, if you two get into an altercation, that's a domestic violence related altercation. So a lot of these charges that are associated to that could be any kind of person crime, but also just disorderly conduct. If you get into a serious altercation with your roommate that meets the level of disorderly conduct, now that's disorderly conduct per domestic violence, right? Or criminal damage, even damaging property of your roommate or your family member.
So, yeah, traditionally, many of us have thought that domestic violence is between a husband and a wife, and what you just described there, it's not. It's obvious a husband and wife could be a domestic violence situation if there's a crime, but all these other relationships under the same roof and families as well.
Absolutely.
And are there, Javier, maybe you want to jump in on this one, are there, or you, Sergeant Rudolph, on seriousness of charges with domestic violence? Are they typically charged at a greater rate or more serious than a typical assault charge or disorderly conduct charge in the community? Is there more seriousness to that in the court?
Well, absolutely. So domestic violence in itself is a tag that gets associated to the charge. So that's why you have assault per domestic violence. So when it has that tag associated to it, when it goes through the criminal justice process, there's other elements that have to be taken into account for. There's also penalties that are added with it, and then if there's a frequency of occurrence, then the penalties get stronger as well.
Okay, so stronger penalties. Is there any opportunities for counseling if someone goes they have a charge, they go in front of the judge, they say they plead guilty, they're found guilty? Are there going to be additional counseling or any other programs out there that can stop the cycle of violence? We can talk about that.
Absolutely. Like Sergeant Rudolph mentioned, domestic violence will bring its own dynamic, and that's where resources become available. Years ago, the state has decided to set aside funding for domestic violence, and that's where we get a lot of resources come into play at that point. Counseling is kind of the tip of the iceberg. Missy runs an amazing organization. We are very fortunate to have them here in Prescott Valley. Counseling and many other things that she'll go into for sure. Unfortunately, there is more domestic violence in the area than we would like, obviously. As a victim service liaison, it does kind of take a toll on reading these cases where children are affected, relationships are obviously affected, and we want to kind of get to kind of nip it in the bud and kind of take command of it before it gets out of control.
No doubt. Well, I appreciate what you do, taking care of our victims every day, right? Every victim in our community related to domestic violence, you're going to have that contact with, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So, heard a little bit about YFAC.
Yes.
Missy, you're the executive director there at YFAC. What is YFAC, and what do you do for our community?
YFAC is the Yavapai Family Advocacy Center, and we've been serving all of Yavapai County for the last 24 years. We're housed here in Prescott Valley, which we love, and we give services to victims of what we call interpersonal crime, and those are things like sexual assault, child abuse, human trafficking, stalking, elder abuse, and of course domestic violence. In 2023, we gave services to over 1,300 victims countywide, and I would say about 45% of those were domestic violence victims. So we have a large percentage of our clients are people affected by domestic violence, and that could be, as you were saying earlier, or Scott was saying, the spouse or the wife, but we also give services to the children in that home because we recognize that they're victims as well when there's a domestic violence situation.
Okay, wow, that's hard work that you do. We appreciate it. I'm sure the community appreciates it as well as the victim. So, can a victim be a man as well?
Absolutely. We have male victims. When I talk about it, I typically will say she when I'm referring to a victim because percentage-wise there are
Right.
more women that are victimized. But yes, we definitely have male victims as well in domestic violence situations.
Right. So how would somebody in the community, this is for all of you, the question is, how would they reach out to law enforcement or YFAC when they need help? What do they do? Where do they call? How do they go about this? Because obviously this is very kind of behind closed doors. I know there's a lot of, it's probably underreported, right? Domestic violence, I would imagine it's underreported.
Definitely, yeah. The national statistics are really concrete in that only 1 out of 10 domestic
Wow.
violence victims are usually going to make a call and report, and that also that when a victim does start to report, because typically there's multiple incidents, they'll go back, it'll happen again. They will attempt to leave or attempt to seek out help about 7 times on average before they're successful in leaving, if they ever are successful in leaving. And there's a lot of emotional and psychological dynamics, financial dynamics, everything around that kind of drives that for people who are victims in these situations. But for us, as far as getting services, victims can come to us directly if they either, for whatever reason, don't want law enforcement involved. And we will still urge them to report, but if they're an adult, they don't have to do that. Or we get referrals from your agency. Javier's bringing families over to us. Scott refers families over. So even in situations where maybe law enforcement aren't able to charge, or the family kind of changed their story, didn't want to charge, they can still get referred to us for services.
Okay. And so I believe we have on the screen here the email and also website that they can contact you. And you're right here in Prescott Valley, correct?
We are. We're on
Awesome.
Bob Drive. Our phone number is 928-775-0669, or they can look us up on our website at yfac.org, and there's a link on there to email us directly. But as Javier said, we offer therapy, and that's paid for. We have 4 contracted therapists we work with from our community support groups for children, for adults, advocacy and assistance with getting orders of protection. We can help if somebody needs to change the locks on their home, court accompaniment, rides, just kind of really anything that they might need that are barriers for them to leave the situation and gain safety.
Great. And stop that cycle of violence, right? Can you all talk a little bit about what that is? We hear that in our community, cycle of violence. What is that? Cycle of violence. How do we stop that?
Well, I think Missy kind of spoke to it a little bit. There's a lot of dynamics that come with it, and there's a lot of manipulation that come with it. So it typically, you're describing an abusive relationship that involves a lot of control. And the reason they call it the cycle is because you're on good times, then you go on bad times, and then you go on recovery times, and it just kind of goes back and forth. You could probably describe it more specifically than I just did, but that's essentially what it is.
So positive for a while, it's all happy, and then breaks.
Right, and when it's good, it's really good, and it's,
Yeah.
and then it moves back into that controlling, a lot of isolation, a lot of, blaming victims' natural supports or families and trying to isolate them so they don't have anybody to call in their time of need or when they want help. Financial isolation, so, limiting their resources to leave, that kind of thing, and a lot of emotional abuse, just really making a person psychologically feel like it might be their fault or partially their fault that this anger is coming out of the abuser, that they're causing them to feel that way or do that, and then so they take on a lot of blame and shame in it, and there's a lot of embarrassment with it too,
Yeah.
and that's why people don't go seek help.
Yeah, very sad. So let's talk a little bit about the law. So let's use an example. If a police officer goes to a shopping center and there's a complaint of shoplifting, and then the business owner doesn't want to prosecute, we typically wouldn't make an arrest in that situation. It would be handled through that relationship between the person that maybe stole something and the business owner, and they decide not to make an arrest. They say no, so we don't make an arrest. Now we go to a domestic violence situation. Officers show up, there's evidence of a crime, there's a victim there that's been going through this cycle of violence, that they've been dealing with all those emotions and stresses that you've talked about today, and they say, and there's obviously evidence that they've been assaulted, say in that case. And they tell the police officer, because they're fearful, they're afraid of what the ramifications are going to be if they say, I want my husband or my boyfriend or my roommate arrested. They're afraid what's going to happen if they say that. If they tell a police officer, I don't want that person arrested, what would our police officer do?
Well, when it comes to crimes of domestic violence, the state steps in and becomes the victim on their behalf. And I think the reason for that is because there is such a variety of reasons that people will refuse to actually seek out to be a victim in the case. However, it comes down to everyone's safety, and that's really the root of the reason why the state steps in. There's an understanding of kind of this cycle that occurs, and there's an understanding there's a variety of reasons why you would choose not to participate in it, but like what you just described, there's evidence of a crime, the person has been assaulted, they are in danger, they're in their home environment, and that's why the police step in and the state becomes the victim on their behalf.
So they can relieve some of that stress for the victim by making that arrest and saying, we as law enforcement, per the state statute, are making the arrest and take that stress and worry away from the victim, where they don't have to stand up and say, I want that person arrested. We just take care of that.
That's right.
Is that the way you see it?
Yes.
And how do you think that's a good thing for
I think
our
it's
victims?
wonderful. We never want to deter a victim from coming forward and making a police report.
Yeah.
We think that's the first step in the healing process. And the last thing we want to do is deter someone from this crime. We have plenty of options available as well. There are protective orders in place. The state of Arizona is at the top of the list when it comes to victims' rights. And I believe we're number 2 in the nation. At least we were a few years ago. But there's no charge usually involved, and a protective order, an order of protection will last 2 years, whereas an injunction of harassment will last 1 year from service date. And you can alter it, you can tweak it a little bit for contact reasons, but it's a great resource to have. I'm proud of the state of Arizona, if you can't tell already, for having this available. And yeah, it helps with that cyclical process. And I just want to let people know, if you find yourself in this situation, just do your best to walk away. If you've been drinking, call a friend to come and get you. Just remove yourself from the situation is one of my best go-tos to tell people.
That's great. Javier, you mentioned injunctions against harassment, orders of protection. How do people go about securing one of those orders?
So they could just walk into any court in the state of Arizona. Your closest court is one resource. You can go to azcourts.azpoint.org or gov, one of those. You can call Missy. You can call IFAC. You can go on their website. They can direct you. you can call the police department and let them know that you're interested in a protective order. They can
Or
guide
they
you.
can call you, I'd imagine, you help them
Yes.
work right through that.
Mhm.
Right. Well, hopefully you don't get a lot of calls on this. I mean, it's very serious crime. I really appreciate what all three of you do and the men and women that work with you do on a daily basis. It's huge. It's just awesome what you do. So thank you. I know it's hard work, and we appreciate it very much. That's it for today's edition of Chief Chat, Prescott Valley. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you got a little bit of information, and listen, if you are a victim of domestic violence or you know somebody that's a victim of domestic violence, we have resources right here in this community to you and your families and help through that. You have three very fine people here that are willing to do that, and a whole host of other folks in our community that can help you through that. So please call, please reach out, and thank you very much.